In this part of the study guide, I'm going to go over the questions that are on A Preface to Politics. So let's start with the first one. What does one have to abandon before thinking about politics, and why? Okay, so that's our question. Let's go to the reading and see what we can find here. So this is A Preface to Politics, Chapter 1, Routiner and Inventor. Let's read this a little bit. Politics does not exist for the sake of demonstrating the superior righteousness of anybody. It is not a competition in deportment. In fact, before you can begin to think about politics at all, you have to abandon the notion that there is a war between good men and bad men. That is one of the great American superstitions. So I think we have sort of our answer there. Before you can begin to think about politics at all, you have to abandon the notion that there is a war between good men and bad men. So let's go ahead and write that down. So, well, why? Why is that? Let's read on. That is one of the great American superstitions. More than any other fetish, it has ruined our sense of political values by glorifying the Pharisee with his vain cruelty to individuals and his unfounded approval of himself. You have only to look at the Senate of the United States to see how that body is capable of turning itself into a court of preliminary hearings for the Last Judgment, wasting its time and our time with and absorbing public enthusiasm and newspaper scareheads. So actually this sounds kind of familiar. If we look in the news, we can find plenty of stories recently about the Senate holding hearings on the Goldman Sachs executives and what they may or may not have done. Here's a recent headline from businessweek.com. Goldman Sachs executives grilled in Senate hearing. So let's take a look at this a little bit. April 27th. Goldman Sachs executives were grilled by U.S. lawmakers who compared the bank's mortgage bankers to bookies, as Senator Carl Levin asked why they sold securities a company itself called shitty. How about the fact that you sold hundreds of millions of that deal after your people knew it was a shitty deal? The Michigan Democrat asked Daniel Sparks, who ran the bank's mortgage unit at the time. Doesn't that bother you at all? Okay, and if we go on, we can see here. You are a bookie. You are the house, said Senator Claire McCaskill, a Missouri Democrat. You had less oversight than a pit boss in Las Vegas. Okay. Now, we're not going to go through all of that right now. But this seems to be similar to what Walter Lippmann is talking about here. But isn't there value in the Senate having these kinds of hearings in order to figure out what kinds of regulations need to be made? Of course, probably, here's the words, wasting its time and our time and absorbing public enthusiasm and newspaper scareheads. So to a certain extent, these kinds of senatorial hearings may be a waste of time. Why? Because we tend to focus on the individuals and pointing the finger rather than dealing with the problems. And after all is said and done, will we really have any reform that's meaningful and useful? So here's a good quote. For 100 needs of the nation it has no thought, but about the precise morality of an historical transaction 8 years old there is a meticulous interest. And this is referring to a historical incident at the time. All right, let's move ahead a little bit. So now if one half of the people is bent upon proving how wicked a man is, and the other half is determined to show how good he is, neither half will think very much about the nation. Okay. And let's move ahead a little bit. So really this sort of pursuit of trying to point the finger or assign blame or identify who's good, who's evil, this is a I think what Littman would call maybe a distraction from the real issues. Here is a nice quote. The angels are largely self-appointed, being somewhat more sensitive to other people's tar than their own. So there's plenty of blame to go around, and passing blame really isn't a useful thing to be doing. It's not an efficient use of our political energies. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back and make our notes. So why? Well, it's really a waste of time, energy, and focus to try to figure out where the blame is. Blame should go, who the evil people are, etc. Well, then, does that mean we should ignore fraud with the Goldman Sachs executives committed fraud? Probably my guess is Littman would say, well, we have laws and we have law enforcement officials, and they should that should be left up to them to sort of pursue and take care of. But our political leaders should not be focused on those kinds of pursuits. Rather, the political leaders should be talking about the more fundamental problems, the real issues, rather than just putting blame on some individuals. Even if they are worthy of blame, still that doesn't help us or solve any problems. So in Littman's point of view, this is a really big problem, that we're always focusing on, all right, who's the evil person, and our political debate sort of goes along those lines. Okay. Let's go to the next question.